The number on the screen reads $1,004. You didn't refresh the page looking for it. You were checking if a bill cleared. It just happened to be sitting there, quiet, like it had been waiting for you to notice. You don't feel anything for the first 4 seconds. Then you feel everything. You close the laptop, you open it again, still there. You sit at your kitchen table at 7:12 on a Tuesday morning, and for 11 years, this number was a joke someone else was allowed to have. Now it's yours, and you haven't told a single person. You will, and that's when the real story starts, because hitting the number was never the hard part. The hard part is what happens the second anyone else finds out. You are 24. You open a brokerage account with $1,800 you'd been embarrassed to admit you had. Your roommate, Danny, watches you do it from a couch. He laughs. He says, "You're going to sit on that money for 40 years so you can be rich when you're old and dead inside?" You don't argue. You just close the laptop. That night, you write a number on a sticky note, a finish line. You put it on the inside of your closet door where no one will ever look. You tell no one the number, not because it's a secret, because saying it out loud makes it something other people get to have an opinion about. You are 26. Your mother asks how the stock thing is going the way she'd ask about a hobby that worried her. You say it's going fine. She says, "Just don't lose it all, okay? Your cousin lost everything in something like that." You don't correct her. You don't explain the difference between an index fund and whatever your cousin did. You just nod. That night, you check the number. It's small. It's real. You don't show her. You are 28. Danny's doing well now. A title with the word senior in it, a car with a payment that has its own line item in his budget. He asks what you're driving these days. You tell him the same Civic. He laughs, not unkindly, and says, "Man, when are you going to live a little?" You say soon. You don't tell him the number has a comma in it now that it didn't used to have. You don't tell him because you already know what his face will do, and you're not ready to watch it do that yet. You are 31. A coworker named Mark sees your lunch, the same turkey sandwich you bring every day, and says it loud enough for the break room. "Bro, you make 6 figures. Live a little." Everyone laughs. You laugh too. What you don't say is that the sandwich isn't about the money anymore. It stopped being about the money 3 years ago. It's a habit now, worn smooth the way a river doesn't need to be angry to keep carving the same path. Mark doesn't know that. Mark just sees a sandwich. People only ever see the sandwich. You are 33. You get promoted. Somebody in HR mentions the raise number out loud in a meeting by accident, and by Friday, the whole floor knows. A woman named Priya, 2 desks over, someone you've barely spoken to in 2 years, stops by your desk and says, "Must be nice." Not a question, a verdict. You say nothing. You go back to your screen. That night, you check the real number, the one nobody in that office will ever see. It has stopped being small. It has started being embarrassing in the opposite direction, the kind of number you now have to actively hide instead of quietly build. You are 35. Your sister Claire gets engaged. The family dinner is loud, plates passing, someone's kid crying in a high chair. Your uncle raises a glass and toasts the happy couple, then turns to you, half joking, all the way serious, and says, "So, when are you going to settle down and get a real house, or are you just going to keep hoarding it?" The table laughs. You laugh too. That's the trap. It always comes wrapped as a joke because nobody's brave enough to ask for something directly. You already know what he's really asking. He's asking if there's a version of your money in his future. You don't answer that question. You answer the joke instead because the joke is easier to survive. You are 37. You buy a modest house, not a big one, just a normal house in a normal neighborhood, paid for in a way nobody at that table will ever be able to picture. Danny sees it the first time and whistles low. "Damn," he says, "guess the boring stock thing paid off." There's something under his voice you haven't heard from him before. Not pride, calculation. He does math you can see happening behind his eyes, comparing his lease to your walls, and you watch something in him quietly recalibrate. He doesn't ask for anything that day. That comes later. You are 39. Your finish line stops being a sticky note in a closet. It becomes a real number on a real screen you check now instead of avoid. $610,000. You tell no one, not because you're ashamed, because you've learned, slowly, painfully, one dinner table at a time, that the number was never just a number to anyone else. It's a mirror, and people don't like what they see standing next to it. You are 41. Your father gets sick, nothing catastrophic, but enough for a hospital bracelet and a night in a chair beside his bed, listening to a machine breathe for him. He wakes up groggy and says the only thing he's ever said about your money in 17 years. You don't need to prove anything to any of them. You don't ask him what he means. You already know. He goes back to sleep. You sit there until the sun comes up, and for the first time, you understand that the people closest to you have been watching this whole thing from a distance you didn't know existed, forming a story about you that has nothing to do with the actual number. You are 43. Your name comes up in an unrelated conversation at a wedding, 3 tables away, loud enough to carry. Someone says, he's done really well for himself. Someone else says, I heard he's worth like $2 million. The number is wrong. It's not close, but you don't correct it because correcting it would require confirming a different number, and once you say any number out loud, it stops belonging to you and starts belonging to the room. You are 45. The wire clears on the sale of a small stake you'd held since you were 29, something you'd forgotten was even still growing. You watch the number cross 7 figures for the first time on a Thursday afternoon while microwaving leftovers. You do not call anyone. You eat the leftovers standing at the counter, staring at a screen, the way you used to stare at a sticky note in a closet 21 years ago. You think about telling Danny. You think about telling your mother. You decide, standing there, to tell no one. You've learned what happens next, and you're not ready for it yet. You're wrong about how long you get to wait. 3 weeks later, Danny finds out anyway. Not from you, from a mutual friend who saw a filing, a name on a document, the kind of paper trail that was never supposed to be public but somehow always finds its way to a family group chat. His text arrives at 9:47 p.m. Heard you hit $1 million. Guess you don't need my help moving this weekend, LOL. You read it twice. You never told him the number. You never told anyone the number. And yet somehow, the way it always seems to happen, the whole family knows by Sunday. The first opinion comes from your mother. She calls Monday morning and opens with, "Why didn't you tell me?" Not "congratulations," as if the number were owed to her the moment it existed, as if silence were a kind of theft. You try to explain that you weren't hiding it, you were just protecting it. And she goes quiet in the specific way she goes quiet when she's decided you're guilty of something and is simply waiting for you to finish talking so she can say the real thing. Well, now that you have it, I assume you'll help your sister with the wedding. Not a question, a reclassification. You are no longer her son who did something quietly impressive. You are a resource that happens to share his face. The second opinion comes from Claire, softer, wrapped in love the way these things always are. She calls to say she's proud of you and then, almost as an afterthought, mentions the caterer went over budget, just a little, nothing crazy. You say you'll think about it. You won't, but you say it because saying no directly this early feels like detonating something you're not ready to watch explode. The third opinion comes from Mark at work, who heard from someone who heard from someone and stops by your desk with the same turkey sandwich joke, except this time there's an edge under it. Guess the sandwich thing worked out for you, huh? He says it's smiling. His eyes aren't smiling. You've become, in the space of one Slack message, a referendum on every choice he didn't make. The fourth opinion, the one that actually lands, comes from Danny. He shows up on a Saturday with 2 coffees, the way he used to when you were roommates, before either of you had anything worth resenting the other for. He sits at your kitchen table, the same table where you once wrote a number on a sticky note he laughed at, and he doesn't ask for anything. Not yet. He just says, I always figured you'd end up fine. I didn't figure you'd end up like this. You wait for the ask. It doesn't come. Not that day. What comes instead is quieter and worse. He looks around your kitchen and you watch him doing the same math you've watched everyone do for 20 years, comparing his life to yours in real time, and something in his face falls that he tries to catch before you see it. You see it anyway. He leaves an hour later without asking for a single dollar. 2 days later, he texts you a link to an investment opportunity that can't lose. You don't reply right away. You think about the sticky note. You think about the sandwich. You think about every joke that was never really a joke. Every must be nice that was really a question nobody was brave enough to ask directly. And you understand, sitting at that same kitchen table 21 years after you first sat there with $1,800 and a plan nobody believed in, that the money was never the thing people had an opinion about. The money was just the mirror. What they actually have an opinion about is themselves reflected back at a size they didn't choose. You don't give Danny the money. You don't explain the difference between an index fund and a scheme that can't lose. You just tell him you're proud of him for asking, and you tell him no, gently. The first real no you've ever given him. He goes quiet. He says he understands. He doesn't, not yet. That comes later, too, the way it always does. The slow, real understanding that shows up years after the fast, fake one. The finish line you wrote on a sticky note when you were 24 is long gone, thrown out in a move 11 years ago, the closet door replaced, the number itself unrecognizable now compared to what it eventually became. But the real finish line was never the number. It was the day you stopped needing anyone else's mouth to check your own. The wire cleared, the world found out, everyone got their opinion, and for the first time in 21 years, none of them changed a single thing about what you were actually going to do next.